Welcome to On Dog Terms. I'm MJ, a professional dog trainer dedicated to helping you navigate life with your dog without the overwhelm or frustration. Whether you're struggling with behavior issues, looking for effective training strategies, or just want to better understand your dog, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about practical, no-nonsense training advice that makes living with your dog easier and more enjoyable. Join me as we dive into real-world training tips, expert insights, and everything you need to build a better relationship with your dog. Because with the right approach, training doesn't have to feel like a struggle. It can be a path to real progress and a more enjoyable life together.
Hi, Sam. We're talking about socialization today, our part 2 from last time because we talked too much. Why don't we start off by talking about what socialization is and what it is not? Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there around that.
For sure.
What's your take on it?
To socialize a dog or socialize a puppy, most people envision a lot of being able to take dogs to like dog parks and have doggy daycare setups where the dogs can go play with their friends for the day while the owners are at work. And in a perfect world, that'd be great. But in reality, there's a lot that doesn't get checked or doesn't get noticed when your dogs aren't being supervised behaviorally like that in a group of other dogs, because they could be picking up bad habits or learning things from other dogs that are not great. But to socialize a dog means to bring a healthy balance of neutrality to all environments, and a dog that's a lot more concerned and focused on their owners and like maybe their group of people, whoever they're with, if it's a family outing, versus seeking attention and interactions from people away from their owners or their group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always tell my clients that to me, socialization is about building confidence and neutrality towards the environment. So I want a dog that is going to be confident in a bunch of different scenarios, but also not be overexcited in those scenarios.
Yeah.
Be able to just go, oh, there's a dog over there. There was a loud noise over there, and still be focused on whatever the human wants it to do or focused on the human or something like that.
To bring neutrality, I think, is maybe sometimes a confusing word that falls on people. And to be neutral is to almost just be indifferent, to be observational and to be aware, but not to be reactionary. A dog who is overly excited or just excited at everything, we don't want to necessarily take away their confidence in the interactions that they have with others, but we definitely want to build more of a desire to just pay attention to the owner versus seeking everything from other people.
I think that when people think of what the goal should be when socializing their puppy, they picture a very happy dog park golden retriever. Like the dog that just loves everybody and everything and is the dog that is walking up to other dogs on a leash and trying to say hi and always have that happy wagging tail. But if we think of it like a spectrum of being social, on one end, you have the dogs that are terrified of everybody and everything. But on the other end, you have the dogs that are way too excited about everybody and everything. And that's not a healthy state of mind either. And if we go back to that episode where you and I talked about stress, excitement is a form of stress. It can also be very rude. So like a lot of dogs don't like the dogs that just run up into their space. But we think that that's normal because it's common, because that's what we see, because those are the dogs that can go everywhere and do everything. So we see them most often out in public, and we think that's how all dogs should be when it's not.
Right. All dogs have different personal bubble spaces, and some dogs are smaller than others, and it's up to each dog to determine like what they want preferably, but we want our dogs to ultimately just be indifferent to the things that they're going to encounter in the environment instead of overly worried or, like you mentioned, overly excited. And just to bring back to they can observe and they can see and they can notice things without having internal or external reactions towards it.
Let's jump right into talking about expectations. For everybody out there that has a puppy, should they all have the exact same expectation of their dog's social ability as an adult?
No, not at all.
Somebody with a golden retriever puppy is going to have different or should have different expectations than somebody with a Akita puppy or a Malinois puppy.
A recent conversation I had with another trainer, Basenji, those are even more types of dogs that you can't have super high expectations for, like friendliness or wanting to be social. Huskies can be like that as well. They can be pretty social sometimes, but they're pretty indifferent or aloof towards other people as well. So husky puppies are a good example that when they're puppies, they're usually pretty social and outgoing and playful. And as they develop into maturity and to adulthood, a lot of times they just become more indifferent or aloof or stuck up is another way that people can attribute to huskies' behaviors when they're older. And it's just their social circle gets smaller as they get older and they desire less and less because their needs are fulfilled socially, typically within their pack, within the home.
I think that goes for most dog breeds, though. Like most puppies love everybody and everything. But as
True.
every dog matures, they get more socially selective about just like us. Like in kindergarten, I could be friends with anybody. And now
Yeah.
as an adult, I'm much pickier about my friends. There are a few breeds that are going to stay super friendly like that. Labradors, golden retrievers, doodles a lot of the time, depending on the doodle mix there.
Mhm.
Um, but most dogs become more selective. And I think that term you used about, not having higher expectations for those breeds, some people might misunderstand that as saying, oh, well, you just can't have high expectations because they're dumb or they're bad
It's
dogs. But in reality, you have to do your research about the breed that you're getting beforehand because the traits that make German Shepherds good at the jobs they're bred to do, at being police and military dogs, at all the different tasks, a golden retriever's temperament wouldn't do those jobs very well. There's always going to be your exceptions. But for the most part, you have to figure out before you get a dog what temperament you're looking for so that you can have high expectations for your goals with that dog and not get that mismatch where the puppy is not going to grow up to be what you want it to be.
Yeah. And there are always exceptions in the breed. And it's what we call kind of a jargon in the dog world is called like a unicorn dog or the unicorn in the breed. There's some Malinois that make fantastic service dogs. The higher driety, nervier ones who are bred for more of that protection side, those aren't going to be your select dogs for a service dog breeding program or a service dog program in general.
I see that a lot with German Shepherds. I think just because I have one, I tend to attract a lot of German Shepherd clients. And I don't work with working dogs, I work with pet dogs. So I attract a lot
Mhm.
of the pet German Shepherd homes. And I see it happen quite often where somebody has had one of the unicorn shepherds in the past that was good with kids and good with strangers and good with dogs and very confident. And then they get a normal shepherd and they think something's wrong with
Yeah.
them. And I'm like, no, this is kind of how they're meant to be. And that's not an excuse to just let the dogs be nervy and reactive and all that.
Yeah.
We have to fix those things. But I don't expect my German Shepherd to love strangers that run up into his personal bubble. That's not what he's bred for.
Yeah. That's a really good point. There's a lot of times that we deal with or we interact with clients or we get pet owners who are strictly shepherd people and they've had shepherds for 20 years and all their shepherds were all the same except this one that they've called for professional help. This one acts differently than the ones that they're used to in the past. And so oftentimes the dogs that are like in that scenario, the newest dog that they get are expressing normal shepherd behaviors, being reactive and being excited at young age. It's kind of a common thing for shepherds as they're going through maturity. And sometimes those other dogs in the past just for whatever reason didn't show or express those same behaviors that they're comparing to their current dog. So they're thinking their current dog is the outlier when in reality they just got some of the unicorn dogs in the past. Sometimes that's just like luck of the draw and the gamble. Sometimes that's just examples of good genetics or weak genetics, one way or the other. It's really common to see those kinds of scenarios. You just were telling me the one about the border collie.
Yeah, Sam and I were talking about a dog before we started recording. And to give people an example, because I think reactivity is something that we also see a lot out in the world. So when people think that a dog is not socialized, they think of reactive when sometimes certain traits are just normal and acceptable. So to give everybody an example, I took my Shepherd Grim out to a big Bass Pro. It's like an hour from us. Like where we live now is small town. And so when we were living by Sam in Colorado, we used to go to Cabela's and Bass Pro and Shields and into all these stores and these busy places. And we've got a decent population, but we don't have a lot of places like that I can bring him anymore. So it was our first time in a setting like that in a long time. And it was very, very busy. It was the weekend and it was crappy weather. So everybody was going shopping and inside. So we were just working out in the parking lot. My husband was in the store. We're doing training. We're practicing some of our rally exercises in the parking lot. And he's doing great. He's dialed in with me, being a good dog. People are walking by. He's fine. being a shepherd, granted, he does not have the best genetics in the world. He does not come from a good breeder. So he does have some weak genetics, but he is always on the lookout for changes in the environment. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean that he's nervous, but that's just what his brain is wired to do. He's always looking for changes. So everybody walking by us is ignoring us and we're doing great. And then this one lady, she kind of popped around a corner and came out of nowhere. And all she yelled out to us from maybe 15 feet away was, "What a beautiful dog." But it was kind of very, not rude, but it was very enthusiastic in our space. And he never got to the end of the leash, but he just took a big step forward and did one big bark at her. And then he immediately turned and looked back at me. And I saw this one family walking by give me a look like, why has she got a reactive dog out here? And don't get me wrong, he can have his reactive moments. But to me, all that was him going, hey, somebody's in our space, and looking back
Yeah.
at me and telling me. I didn't correct him or fix him. I was just like, good boy, and get back into a heel, please. And she was like, oh, he doesn't like that. I'm like, no, he does. I made a joke. I was like, he doesn't like when people call him pretty. But to me, that is very standard in the shepherd world. Now, he's not being super reactive in the parking lot. We're not causing a fuss. He's not having issues with other dogs walking by. He's just going, hey, something changed. And he had a mild reaction to it. And then he came back into a heel. He is not a dog I expect to be super friendly and go, oh my God, do you have a cookie for me? Will you pet me? I love you so much.
Mhm.
He's just telling me, hey, something changed.
Having certain expectations for the breeds that you have, or like the certain dog that you have, of those personality traits. Same example, like you were just saying, but with my 2-year-old Malinois, she's a very high drive, very focused on work. There's never a day that she doesn't want to work. There's never a breath of her life that she ever doesn't want to work. Like, this girl is built for. So settling down is a really tough thing for her to do. And especially in newer and busier environments they stress her out in the sense she's not reactive. She doesn't have blow ups at other people or dogs. I see other like senses from her where she gives me signs that she's uncomfortable, but I still have expectations for her in those moments and in those environments. And those are things that, say, like a Cabela's, she is a very friendly dog, but in environments like that, she's just not interested. She's not aggressive. She's indifferent, and she just wants her space. She's never going to be in a sense of like a danger to someone or something, but she does have her bubble, and she doesn't appreciate things like that. She'd give side eyes. She would never be like, it's never outward expression.
Grim is very vocal. He is more vocal than I would like him to be, but it's just his personality. Like, it's not
That's
that he's being bad. He just likes the sound of his own voice a bit. And it's not extreme, it's controllable, but I know him well enough that if I get mad every time he gives one woof, him and I are just never going to get along. I
Yeah.
don't want to change his personality. And I think that with dogs like Grim and with Tip, in the wrong home, people would think they're very bad dogs. Like, if they were in homes, yeah, they would be. But in homes where, let's say, some nice household that just wanted a happy-go-lucky, easy, calm, super friendly, didn't have to worry about kids running up in their bubble, didn't have to worry about other dogs sniffing their butt, they would be very upset with Grim and Tip because that's not the dog that they would have wanted. But Grim and Tip are very good examples of their breeds
Yeah.
in that nothing that they're doing is abnormal. It's just not what some people want.
Yeah. And it's oftentimes not desirable for average pet owners. She'd probably thrive in another working home. She's not up for sale though. She's mine. Keeping us. I like
Sam
her.
likes her.
Oh yeah, she can. Even though I do have management with her and my other male Malinois, but it's it's easier for me to exist with. She wouldn't jive well with another pack of dogs. So as far as socializing her goes, even as a 2-year-old dog, her socialization hasn't stopped because I do expect indifference and neutrality and aloofness from her when we're in environments. And if I'm not constantly quizzing her or having her practice exercising those kinds of emotional regulations, we wouldn't do well when we go to perform at trials or test our obedience skills in other areas. We would see a lot of fallout if I don't continually test her in stimulating environments like that. And those are very important, even at an adult dog. I'd say she's more of a teenage adolescent dog right now. But if I don't continually expose her to those things, she's not going to have that muscle memory or that skill. And so then dogs like her, you would see a lot more warning signs, or you would see maybe a lot more expressions towards that. And another thing I kind of wanted to bring up about just unicorns and breeds, typically when people go to a breeder and they want a specific kind of dog, they're looking for a specific temperament. They're looking for a specific workability, predictability, all of that. So that's what I did when I wanted a dog like her, like a high drive working dog to do protection sports. But on the flip side, I know of a dog who came from a rescue, and oftentimes when we get dogs or even puppies from rescues, they can come with behavioral problems. There's not guaranteed, and it's not always, but sometimes that's the case. So, and I know this other dog by genetic and on paper should maybe come with behavioral problems, just given our past or our history with diagnosing some of these things. It's a Husky Shepherd Pit Bull with like 20 other breeds in there. Yeah.
Dang.
Young super mutt was like born on the street, found on the street with his rest of his litter, was adopted out and neutered before 8 weeks old, but has had one owner, had great socialization as a puppy, had solid foundation of training all throughout adulthood. The dog's 4, and that dog is very, very socially responsible. He's very trustworthy. He's very healthy. He's very balanced. He's very safe. And on the flip side, the dog that I got, genetically, she's just disposed to not liking other dogs. She's neutral. She's indifferent, but she doesn't crave like dog friendship. That's just not on her table. She doesn't really care. She likes people way more. So it's just kind of funny, the difference of, even though you could specifically set out for some of these things and seek that, the dog is going to be who the dog is. And we do have to train to what that dog wants socially as well. So that was just my little rant about, sometimes even when we seek the things that we're going for, sometimes it can happen that you don't exactly get the maybe same predictability of like the temperament that you want.
You made 2 points in the last couple sentences that I want to touch on both. One is that, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully. One is that we've talked about nature and nurture before, and both play a role. Even if you socialize a puppy by the book perfectly what you're supposed to do, you may still get a puppy with a personality that is never going to be outwardly super friendly and social, because you can't change a dog's personality. When it comes to adopting a puppy or adopting a dog versus getting one from a breeder, there's camps for both. There are people that say you should always get from a breeder. There are people that say adopt, don't shop. Sam and I are advocates for both, as long as you're doing them right. Typically, the advice I'm going to give is if somebody comes to me and they're like, well, I'm thinking about getting a dog. I kind of want to just get a rescue, but I'm not sure. If you have some wiggle room, if you are perfectly prepared to get what you get and be ready for some surprises and adapt your life to that dog, get a rescue. If you know exactly what you need and nothing else is going to fit the bill, let's say you need a dog that can go hiking with you on weekends, but has a good off switch during the week, needs to be good with your small kids, needs to be good with your grandma comes over on weekends and she's elderly and can get knocked over easy. You need a dog that can take a sick day with you when the kids are sick. You need a dog that you don't have to worry about leaving at the boarding facility or taking out in public to the playground. You can get a rescue, but there's always that chance that you get the dog that does not fit all of those check boxes. If you go to a breeder, granted, there's always still a small chance, but you're going to be better off getting the dog that you need, because a good breeder is going to take the litter of puppies that they have. Before they even have a litter of puppies, they're going to go through and tell you whether or not their breed is a good fit for you. Then they have a litter. The breeder is going to pick which puppy in that litter you get, because they're going to pick the puppy with the temperament best suited to your goals. And sometimes breeders will have a litter. You put a deposit down on a puppy and they end up going, you know what? None of the puppies in this litter match what you need. Let's do the next litter. A good breeder will be honest about that. So we do see puppies getting returned to breeders periodically because they didn't quite fit the bill, but it happens much less often than rescues that get returned because they didn't fit any of the family needs. I'm not saying that getting a puppy from a breeder is better, or that I'm saying don't ever adopt. But if you're going to adopt, you need to have a little more wiggle room, because dogs are going to act different in a shelter setting than they will in your home, or they might act different in, they're getting bounced around foster to foster. I see it happen a lot where it's like the 3-month mark. Dogs start acting different around the 3-month mark in a home because they now feel like it's their home and their true colors are going to show. So that's just a note too.
The 3-3-3 rule. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I think that's fairly common in our industry too, which I was going to say funny enough, but I don't, this isn't funny at all. There's a dog in my reactive dog group class that has just hit the 12-week mark in his home and he's getting returned back to the rescue. The owners have done an amazing job. They've worked with multiple trainers. They have done everything they can, but the amount of safety risks and stress in the home is just not fair to them either, because the rescue they got this dog from did not disclose any of the not just reactivity, but actual true aggression that this dog
Yeah.
had.
And that's unfortunately sometimes what we see like on a behavior side that's pretty common coming from dogs with rescues is behavior things are like swept under the rug, or they're just not talked about in higher hopes that these dogs with behavior issues that these people can oftentimes see beforehand, they still get adopted out, and which is fine. Often we're able to help on the training side, but like you said, that around that time the dog really settles in and gets comfortable, the personality of that dog and the actual true temperament of that dog's needs is gonna start showing around that time.
And for those listening that are in the rescue world that are just shaking their fists at us right now, if you work in the rescue world and you're like, my rescue wouldn't do that, thank goodness, and you work for a good one, or you work
Yeah.
with a good one. And there are good ones out there, but there are also a lot of really crappy ones
Yeah.
that purposely don't disclose this information just to get volume and social media and all that stuff. So there are good ones out there. There's just also bad
Yes.
ones. The other thing that you talked about, though, is you said that tip socialization is not done. And that is going to
Yes.
perfectly transition us into our next little topic here. But Sam and I are going to talk about in a second kind of the ideal time to socialize a puppy. But with that comes also just socialization is lifelong. Because even if you socialize a puppy perfectly from the get-go, but then you become a hermit and you don't leave your house at all for 3 years and you bring them back out in the world, all of that is going to disappear and you have to do it all over again. I think a lot of people got that with COVID that happened.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about, we'll go back to puppies. What is the ideal time to socialize a puppy?
Moment you get it.
There's actually a number. So there is a socialization period is what it's called. It's a developmental period in the brain. And this is where veterinary medicine and training are going to butt heads a tiny bit. And it's not that either one is right or wrong. They both have their pros and cons. So the prime socialization period for a puppy closes at 16 weeks.
Yeah.
Which just so happens to be the same age that most puppies get their final round of vaccines. Up until 16 weeks, it's actually, I think it's between 5 and 16 weeks off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And in that period is when puppies are most able to accept new situations, new environments, new people, and feel good about them. After 16 weeks, it gets a little harder, and the part of their brain that is responsible for keeping them safe and being more wary kicks in. You can socialize a puppy after 16 weeks, and you should continue to do so. But if you wait until after 16 weeks, you're missing out on the best time to do it, and the most influential time to do it. So a lot of veterinarians for good reason, will say don't take your puppy anywhere until they've had their final round of vaccines. But then you miss out on quite a bit of socialization that you could do and do really well.
Yeah.
So I think there's pros and cons to both, and you always have to make an educated decision. I can tell people what I chose to do with Graham when he was a puppy. I wasn't too worried about rabies, and I chose, knowing his breed and knowing that he came from bad genetics, I chose to prioritize socialization, and I'm really glad that I did. He's still not perfect, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
So, like, of course, I wasn't taking him to dog parks and walking around on the pet store floor where other dogs have been all day. But you can take your puppy, like there was one puppy I was doing puppy field trips with that hadn't had his final round of vaccines yet. And I had a wagon, like it was perfectly clean, brand new wagon. And I would take him in the wagon to public parks and he would just sit in the wagon and we would people watch and watch all the dogs walk by. And I wouldn't let anybody come up and touch him. But he got to sit by the playground and hear the kids laughing and next to the skate park and hear the skateboards. And then we'd go to Home Depot and I'd put him in the cart. So there's a lot that you can do without exposing your puppy unnecessarily to things like parvo and rabies and stuff like that.
Yeah. And another thing with socializing puppies and when to do what, I think is really overwhelming and oftentimes challenging or intimidating for some people, because it is important to know what the puppy can handle and can't handle at whatever age it's at. And also depending on when you enter into its life as well. If you're get the puppy at 8 weeks or at 16 weeks or at 6 months, trying to figure out what the dog has had, what it's seen, what it's been exposed to, and being able to pick up there and start showing it those things. So like you mentioned, people walking by, going to stores and things like that. If you get a puppy at a young age, that crucial imprint stage, like 5 to 16 weeks, in that stage, and knowing that the puppy isn't up to date on full vaccines, you aren't going to take them to stores and have them licking things on the ground and picking things up that they shouldn't. But you still have to take the puppy outside for potty training. And there's things that you can do if you have the accessibility to potty a puppy, like in a front yard or even in an apartment complex, for example. Socializing doesn't mean going up and saying hi to everybody or everything that a puppy meets or sees, but you can also start teaching that indifference and engagement with you, or just the desire for the puppy to hang out with you by giving it some treats when it pays attention to you, and encourage a little bit more like focus on you. And play is a huge way to facilitate that, but we've discussed that in a different episode. Back to the front yard, I love being able to people watch and teach my puppies to people watch and teach them to watch people's and dogs and squirrels go by, but play with me or on with me instead, or take a treat from me instead. That way I'm able to assess how the puppy felt about the interaction that it saw. Was it scared of the biker? Was it scared of the runner? Was it excited? Was it indifferent? Being able to be hands-on in those moments are really crucial. Another thing too is the socialization. Vets offices are a huge one that we obviously, when the puppies are young, they have to go in for vaccinations on a pretty regular schedule. So it's easy to get that a little bit of socialization when the puppy is the most friendly at the vet at that age. And then when they need shots less and less, once that dog starts to go through that puberty stage, and that can be anywhere from like 8 months to a year and a half for some dogs. If the dog never needs to see a vet again up until it's rabies shot at about a year old, there's a chance that that wasn't enough socialization in an environment like the vet. And come the puppy at a year old, you might start to see a little bit of shyness or hesitation or reservation towards the vet tech staff when at 4 months old, the puppy was fine. And those are good things to keep in mind, and not go, oh, now my dog's scared of the vet. Now it's always going to be a bad experience. You can oftentimes set up socialization days with your vet. I know mine would and has done it. You can ask if just pay the service fee for the day, the exam fee, and have a good day where you can go slow and try to give the vet tech the ability to give the puppy treats or give the dog treats, or just bond with it, or just get used to it and get more exposure to those environments. And so that's where the continual socialization is important into the teenage years and adult years.
When I was living out in Denver, there was a couple clinics. Not my vet didn't. Granted, the time that I lived out there, every single veterinary office was overbooked and understaffed.
Yeah.
But there were a couple where they couldn't afford the doctor's time, but they did what they called happy visits. And you could pay, it was just a tech appointment, and you could pay, and the tech would set it up just like an appointment, but they would go really slow. They'd weigh your dog, they'd go into an exam room, and they would just hang out with your dog and you and give treats and sit on the floor to make it a good experience. And they do that for a dog of any age. I want to talk a little bit more about the vet for a second, because you're right. When they're that young and they're going to the vet that frequently, you want to make them good experiences, but it's so easy for that to go bad. And I think, like, when I got Grim, so puppies will go through something called fear periods, which is basically a big dip in confidence. And anything that they perceive as scary during a fear period is going to imprint a little bit more than usual. When Grim was a puppy, I had this one, I know exactly why he's bad at the vet. He was maybe 5.5, 6 months old. And I'm going to blame myself. This is my fault, because I should have stepped in and stopped what was happening, but I didn't, because I was still really young at the time. I wasn't super confident in myself as a trainer yet. And you go to the vet, and the vet's the doctor, and you think that they know best. Grim had an ear infection, and we're in the exam room, and it was a very small little exam room. And I think the vet that I was seeing was afraid of shepherds. I've always run into, there's always like one vet tech at every clinic that loves shepherds, and then all the others don't like them. And I usually figure out which tech that is and ask for that one. But he was small. He was a big puppy, but he was a baby. He was 5.5 or 6 months old. He had an ear infection. So they had 2 vet techs in the room. And then it was a very big, tall male doctor. And I actually used to work with this guy. So he was a very nice doctor. But Grim is a little nervous. And the 2 vet techs they've got one on each side of him restraining him, backed into a corner. And directly in front of him, the vet comes in over his head with one of the ear swabs. And of course it hurts, right? Grim is like cowering nervous because he's being restrained by 2 different people. He's backed into a corner. This guy's reaching over his head. Well, he goes in with the ear swab and it hurts. And Grim squeals. And all 3 of them jumped back so far. And I saw it on his face in that moment. He learned exactly how to get the vet to back up. And then the same day, they wanted to take his temperature. And when they went to do that, he kind of grumbled and did the same thing. And they backed off and didn't do it. It took me 2 years to fix that problem. Because in one vet visit, he learned that he can be big and bad and scary, and the vet won't do anything to him. Now, I'm not saying hold your puppy down and strap them to the table and force them through things that are scary, but I am saying that if you recognize your dog is nervous, you need to step in front of your puppy and go, hey, can we do it in a different way? Can you give him a minute? Can we have a more open room? Can I hold it? Like some vets won't let you restrain the dog because it's a liability thing, but I would vocalize to your vet and don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm not a big fan of how my puppy's feeling right now. Can we change something?
Moose, he's an 8-year-old Malinois now, but I got him at 3 years old. From 1-year-old to 3, I don't think he went to the vet. And he's a dog that has behavior issues. He was very reactive at a young age towards things like wheels and strangers. His socialization really probably didn't hit the key marks that it needed to in its prime stages. Like that imprint stage and then teenager stages. So either way, when I got him at 3, straight to the vet, I did muzzle him at first, but it's taken me about 4 years, 5 years of coming up now. He still hates the vet. He does not tolerate being poked and prodded, but that's because he didn't get exposure to that at a really, really crucial stage for a dog who already had reactivity issues outside of things like that and towards strangers. So it's things that I manage, and my vet does thankfully let me handle him, and it's for the best. And he's muzzled, he's restrained, and they trust that he's not going to come at them and I'm not going to let him. I still consider those socialization days for him, and I still have training and I still have expectations because he has to go to the vet. There's just no way around it. So I still treat those days as he still gets rewarded. We still attempt to give, the vet can toss treats at him once the exam's over and once the muzzle comes off and everything's okay. He wouldn't probably allow for pets, but we're working towards that. And it's only now that he's 8, he's settled down to a lot in his drive and his age that way. But only now are we considering even allowing some more socialization outside of that. And it's because it's taken also this long for him to even be accepting. And even the last vet visit, I was very proud of him. He needed 2 vaccines and he needed to just be checked over. And he hates when she's doing the exam and poking him and pulling his legs and manipulating him. He's grumbly and he gets just a little vocal about it, but he's not turning around and he's not trying to like light up on her. And I'm not proud of this. I'm not bragging about it. I hate that he does it and it's embarrassing, but my vet allows it and she trusts that, again, everyone's going to be safe. And I am managing that, but I'm just going to be managing that for the rest of his life. That's just who he is. He's never going to, I can't say never, maybe, I don't know, but I don't foresee him ever seeking friendship from the vet.
This is a piece of advice that is not going to be accessible to everybody. I'm very aware of that, but I also don't want to withhold the advice and assume that it's not helpful to anybody. The best things I have ever done to help Grim actually enjoy going to the vet, like I'm at a point now where I'm actually like, Grim kind of enjoys this. Not entirely, he doesn't like every part of it, but I thought he was going to be a difficult dog at the vet forever. The best piece of advice that I can give to anybody who can afford to do so is acupuncture or chiropractor. And for a couple of reasons. Grim had an injury like 3 years ago now, and we started going to chiropractic first. And I would love to get a chiropractor on here to talk to because I think it'd be fascinating. But I remember her telling me that when
I have one I can ask.
yeah, ask her because I would love to pick her brain. But Grimm's chiropractor back in Denver was telling me that when puppies come out of mom, their spines can get a little wonky. And that if you can get them to a chiropractor, like before they're even ready to go to their forever homes, chiropractors can actually feel and like realign things to help prevent hip dysplasia and knee issues. So fun fact for puppies, but from a socialization aspect, if you can do this from puppyhood, I think it would help significantly. But even for dogs that have come to not like the vet, acupuncture and chiropractic are different experiences. Acupuncture in particular, it's still a
Yeah.
clinical setting and it is still somebody they don't know, a doctor examining them and touching them, but it feels good. I didn't think that Grim would tolerate acupuncture at all. And now we're at a point where he walks in, he lays on the bed and he looks at her like, do this. And he loves it. I muzzle him for it because I want everybody to be safe. And he does have his little moments where she will touch him a certain way. So, like, imagine down his spine. She has to touch the spots to feel where the needle needs to go. So, he's learned that it's going to be a touch and then a poke. And he has very, very tight muscles in one spot in his spine. That's why we go. So, something hurts. Sometimes she'll put a needle in that spot. And it's so funny because I'll be sitting on the floor with mob treat and his head will whip in her direction. And I'll say yes. And it'll whip back to me. But for the most part, I think what it has taught me and Grim in order to communicate at the vet better and make him feel better is he has learned that when he is on the dog bed, he can be touched. And when he steps off the dog bed, he gets a break. And people would think, I think they might assume that that means he'll learn, oh, I'll just step off the dog bed and nobody will touch me. But it actually lets him shake it off and he will get right back onto the dog bed when he feels like he needs a break. And that skill has actually transferred over to our regular vet exam. So now when he's at the vet, if he grumbles or if he gives me a certain look, I will tell the vet, hey, can you give him a second? And she'll back off. And he will literally shake it off. And then he will go up and he'll give her little kisses through his muzzle. He'll give her little kisses on her chin and he'll be all happy and she can go back to doing whatever she needs to do. And I 100% accredit that to acupuncture because we had the setting and we were there regularly enough. We go once a month. I know that's not accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
But even if we were going every other month or every 3 months, I still think that he would learn, okay, the stranger feels good. I have some control and some say here. And it really helped him get more comfortable and have good experiences. Whereas I feel like the regular vet, and I don't mean this about, my personal vet, this is just the veterinary industry because their time is very valuable and they've got a lot of patients and sick patients and stuff like that. It's very in and out. I need to do what I need to do. You're usually there for something not fun. Like, it's one, even on your wellness exams, they're getting vaccines or blood works, they're getting poked with stuff. When possible, things like that can be an avenue to socialize to that setting in a way that feels better.
Interesting. Acupuncture is kind of surprising in that you have that experience in that sense, especially with Grim. I'll have to look more into if that's how that works, but because there might be a day that I need to do that with Tippy, but we do see a vet, like a dog sport vet chiropractor.
Mhm.
And we're seeing her pretty regularly before this last trial. And I need to get her set up now to go see her again afterwards because she wanted to check her out. But the chiro vet, I think, has also helped in general. Tip's a really healthy dog. She's not had to need a lot of poking and prodding or anything besides normal vaccines and stuff. So having a chiro be able to pet her and touch her, and after like a manipulation or an uncomfortable pop or something, she's safe enough that she can pet her from behind or whatever. And I think that's also helped lead into our vet visits with our primary.
Yeah. See, it just takes some of the stress off. That it's like if you had to go to the ER every time you had to go see a doctor, you'd really hate doctors. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of doctors to begin with.
And you've had to get
I was
way more
literally
experience
I got an
with-
ultrasound this morning on my thyroid, which looked good, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm going to jinx myself because that was just what the tech said. That's not what the radiologist said. So there's no wood in here for me to knock on. But
We're putting good juju out.
because, okay, this is the weirdest analogy in the world, right? But like thyroid ultrasounds, for everybody who doesn't know, I had thyroid cancer 4 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago. When I first got my first thyroid ultrasound after the thyroid cancer, I was an anxious mess because last time I had gotten one, I got diagnosed with cancer. But now every time I go, it's less and less because it's the most relaxing thing in the world. They turn the lights off. Nothing hurts. I don't get poked with anything. They don't talk to me. It's I'm in and out in 5 minutes. So that is a good doctor's appointment. Whereas if every time I went to the doctor, they were, I was going to the blood work clinic and doing blood work, not that bad, but I still don't look forward to those. So if your dog really has an issue with the vet, sometimes finding a happier, feel good way to do it can help too.
Those mock
But
scenarios in a sense where you can maybe go slower.
yeah. But okay, getting back to socialization. So let's go back on to how to socialize puppy. Let's talk about body language for a minute. What body language signs should people look for that say a dog is stressed or anxious or uncomfortable?
Oh my gosh, so many. Eyes, ears, and tail are the first things that come to mind. The dog's head position and where the neck is positioned, if it's higher, if it's low. That's a huge thing that I just incorporate with eyes, ears, and the tail as well. Things to look out for: ears forward versus ears pinned back in certain situations. Whale eyes are a big thing.
For people who don't know, what is whale eye?
Whale eye is essentially, it looks like when the pupil, it just gets very, very dilated and their eyes are very big and their
You
eyes are
see the
very
whites of their eyes.
yeah, you can see a lot of the whites and the pupils dilate a lot. So it's very, very large. And oftentimes the dog's body are going to be still or stiff in those moments as well. So that's something to note when they're giving whale eyes specifically. Lip licking is a huge one. Back to the head position. If the dog is holding its head or neck higher up versus lower, kind of the head down below the shoulders, are indications that a dog might be a little bit more nervous or cautious. Tail positioning is also important. How high the tail is along the structure of the body versus how low the tail is on the structure of the body. And tail wagging is also a huge one that gets wildly misinterpreted. A wagging tail doesn't always equal a happy, excited dog. It could be a happy, excited dog to bite. It could be a happy, excited dog to run away from to flee from something.
Could just be
Typically,
highly aroused, which can be unstable.
yes.
Doesn't mean that the dog is aggressive in that moment, but it could become aggressive just because its feelings are too big and it doesn't know how to deal with them.
Yes, the faster the tail, and it is sometimes often related to the adrenaline in the dog's body as well. And adrenaline isn't always equal to friendliness or excitement in situations like that.
Another body language thing that can be a stress signal is particularly when you're letting strangers pet your puppy. This can also happen to you. It can happen to your spouse or your kids or other people in your household that your puppy knows. But in particular, when you take your puppy out and people want to say hi and your puppy starts quietly licking their chin a lot, that is what's called an appeasement behavior. That is usually not actual kisses in the sense of what humans think kisses are. It is usually
Yeah.
I don't want conflict, but I really want some space right now. Let me try to appease you to make that happen. So if I see that, I'm going to say, oh, we're all done with being pet. No more of that. Usually, when we're socializing a puppy, we want the puppy to be having a good experience. That's number one. We don't want puppies that are terrified or scared, or we're not dragging them into scenarios where they're more nervous, because then we can create a bad experience. And now we're doing the opposite of what we want. But I also don't want puppies that are so overly excited that they're learning bad behaviors.
Yeah.
I don't want puppies walking into the pet store and dragging you around the store and like play bowing at every dog they see and jumping on all the people walking by. They may be happy, but that's going to breed rude behavior and we don't want that. So we're looking for a nice happy medium where the dog is engaged with you, they're happy, they're calm-ish depending on the scenario, whatever is appropriate energy levels for that moment. So they're actually having a good experience and learning how to behave in that setting.
Yep. You made the good point with how sometimes these overly excited behaviors that we allow puppies to express, just with puppies being puppies, can lead to rude, pushy behaviors as they get older, like the jumping on dogs inappropriately or jumping on people inappropriately too.
Yeah. I have this one memory. It was like around Christmas time and I went into PetSmart for something and somebody had their dog in there and it was like an adolescent, probably around 9 months-ish. And it was jumping on every single person it could get to. And this one little girl started screaming and crying because she was terrified of dogs. They were in there buying cat litter. But you have to be respectful of the people around you too, in addition to teaching your puppy, hey, that's not okay. Some people are like my neighbor, the kid that lives across the street from me. He loves to wave at all of our dogs, but he's allergic to dogs. They can't touch him. He will break out in hives. So you have to teach your dog how to not invade the personal bubble of people that don't want that.
Yeah.
Now we want to make sure our puppy's happy, having a good time and well behaved. Let's say I'm a client and I called you and I was like, how do I socialize my puppy specifically to people? What do you say?
Specifically to people.
Yes. Like, how do I
Um,
socialize my puppy with people?
I would start to teach neutrality and indifference first with the puppies. So that's denying some interactions with people and teaching the puppy to be a little bit more observant, neutral, not barking at other people. I would be teaching them how to facilitate engagement and eye contact with the puppy, how to play with the puppy in new environments. So that is denying some interactions with people or dogs. I like to teach my dogs a cue to go say hi to people, and it is literally go say hi. That is a release that they've been given to like in any position they can be in anywhere. And I can say, okay, go say hi. And they'll go, they specifically know that they can go up and they can go say hi to said person. So I like being able to teach the puppy when and where we're socializing because it's not that we're never going to get there. I know I want to talk about that too. I know because through what?
Fun fact. Sam ruined that for me. Keep
Yes,
going.
I know. All good success with teaching this except one dog. Unfortunately, so anyway, so that would be my suggestion with puppies is teaching the when and where that every person that they see is not going to be an interaction or an engagement with them. Teaching the puppy to know what to expect when that sense is it's on our terms when we give the permission or when we give that ability or the access to that type of reinforcement or reward versus the puppy demanding or expecting it because they are so happy and social and friendly that everyone is their best friends. And that's okay. But it just they need to be told when and where. And that's a really, really easy thing to teach when they're really young, except the story we're about to tell.
But yeah, now before we tell this story, I have an analogy that I think my clients seem to understand really well in regards to what Sam's talking about. Have you heard the grocery store analogy for this?
Maybe.
I have been saying this for so long that I honestly don't remember if I got it from somebody else or not. So maybe I did. And if you're out there, thank you so much. But essentially, I think of it like when you go to the grocery store, and I apply this to both dogs and people in regards to socialization for dogs. So when I go to the grocery store, if I run into my best friend, we're going to see each other down the aisle and go, oh my God, hi, and like run down the aisle and hug the aisle for like 20 minutes talking. If I see my neighbor, I may, in passing, politely go, hey, Kevin, how are you? How's little Henry doing? Small talk, small talk. Okay, see you later. But 99% of people I see in the grocery store, I ignore. Maybe I give a polite smile or a polite excuse me if I need to get by them, but I ignore them. And I think that when people are socializing their puppies, they assume they need to introduce their puppy to everybody and everything. But in reality, what you should be aiming for is that grocery store kind of metaphor there. So your friends, your family, the people that live in your home, your best of friends, your family members you see all the time can interact with your puppy. You need to teach your puppy how to do so politely and appropriately. But those are people that I allow to interact with my dogs. Then you have your acquaintances, your neighbor. I used to do this as like the clerks at the pet store. So people that I may see more regularly, the cashiers at the pet store, the vet techs, the vet, my neighbor who I see all the time and regularly stop to talk to. Those are the people that you want your dog to be able to sit and politely handle while you say hello and wait for your permission if you're going to give them permission to say hi. But they shouldn't be dragging you to those people. They should be pretty calm and not have strong feelings about those people. And then you have everybody else, everybody that you pass on your walks, the other people shopping in the pet store, the people you walk by when you go into stores like Cabela's, or the people riding their bikes by you are the people your dog should learn how to ignore. And you want to teach your dogs that context. There are certain people that you know that you can interact with more freely. There are certain people you see regularly that you need to behave with. And then there are people that you need to ignore. And I really like that thought process for who gets to say hello to your puppy. And that goes for dogs too. My friends and family dogs can say hi to my dogs. My neighbors' dogs, I want them to be able to walk next to each other on a leash and sit and ignore each other while the humans say hello. And everybody else's dog that I don't know can just screw right off and go away.
The grocery store analogy is really, really good. I actually haven't heard that, but I am going to steal that. So thank you to whoever you got it from.
Yeah. Now tell them how you ruined Grim.
Hold on. The alternative to some of those things that you hear when socializing a puppy is like 100 people in 100 days. And that's not necessarily bad advice per se, but I do think that it's important to be introspective in those moments of if your puppy isn't really enjoying all these interactions that it's getting with people, then maybe we need to not do as many. Quality over quantity is more important of those kinds of interactions than 100 people in 100 days. That can be pretty overwhelming. And for a dog or even puppies who are a little bit more reserved or not as interested, that really quickly lead to creating an aversion and or aggression towards people. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
I think how you interpret that too matters. The way that I interpret it is exposure to 100 people in 100 days, not interaction with.
Yeah.
So I want my puppy to see 100 people in the background. I want them to see men with funny hats and kids with backpacks and ladies with blue rain jackets and people with umbrellas and people with wheelchairs. But that doesn't mean I want them interacting with all those people. I just want them to see them and learn that they're not relevant to them. They're not scary and they're not exciting, but they are there and they're nothing to be afraid of.
Yep. So the story, when MJ's German Shepherd Grimm, when he was a puppy, around, how old was he?
He was 12 weeks when I got him.
So between 12 weeks and, I don't know, 8 months old, somewhere between that time frame. I also had a puppy who was maybe like 6 months older than yours at the time. I don't remember the point.
A couple weeks, right? They were babies together. Silas was only a couple weeks older than Grimm. Because we have a video of them playing and they were both itty bitty babies.
I was thinking they were like a little bit longer and okay,
No.
a couple weeks to a couple months, something along those, but very, very, very close in age. I had a Doberman puppy. She had the German Shepherd puppy. So they got to like grow up together and roll around and play and whatever. So when we used to work together at this training facility, one would already be in the facility and then the other one, when their dog would come in and we'd be like, okay, go say hi. And then just let our puppies run around and play and run up to each other. And we did wait for, like I said, wait for the release to get there. Like they had to sit or wait or just wait for the cue. But inadvertently, Grimm learned that that's how he says hello to people, not just me and Silas.
Hold on, Sam. Let me tell the story from a different perspective here.
Let's listen in.
You used to, because you'd have Silas somewhere else or he'd be loose forever, but you would hold Grimm in between your legs while you sat in the chair. And when the other human employees walked through the door, you'd restrain him and go, Grimm, kill, and point, and he would take off barking at them.
Whoa.
So,
Yes, I did forget the kill part. Yes, I just teach that.
well, now, granted, I can't say kill anymore because he'll really freak out and he's big and scary now. But now I can't even use the go say hi because if you just point in somebody's direction, he thinks that's how you greet them.
I did forget the kill. I definitely forgot the other employees. I thought it was just, I guess. Yeah,
No,
I
you
can see
also you also did it. We went to a regional seminar down in Pueblo. Remember that? And
Oh,
Grimm
yeah.
was a little older. He was probably somewhere between 6 and 8 months. He was still a puppy, but a bigger puppy. And he was under our table. And there was this employee from one of the other locations whose name I do not know, big guy. And he was getting his morning coffee or something. He was walking by and I don't remember if Grimm was off leash or if I just holding the leash, but you said Grimm kill and you pointed and Grimm charged him and his face turned white.
Yeah, I did screw that one up. It was really funny because I knew he wasn't going to bite anybody, and then it wasn't funny anymore.
So your trainers mess up too, guys. We learn our lessons too.
Yes, I learned what not to do very quickly, and I can tell Riley that to kill because I did teach Riley that. I remember that one with him, but he's harmless. He can't bite.
Okay, so we talked about people. I say the same goes for dogs. For the most part, I don't allow on-leash greetings with dogs, especially dogs that I don't know. There's a lot of frustration there on a leash. Now, with that being said, I also don't just let my dogs play off leash with dogs I don't know either. So I kind of think of it as the same. My friends and my family's dogs that I know and that I trust, I will allow my dogs to interact with. Usually I'm looking for neutrality first. So I'm not bringing the puppy that is just barking and lunging at the end of the leash and letting them go play. They have to be able to control themselves. But when it comes to strange dogs, I want my dogs to see them in the background and learn that they mean nothing and they're not scary and they're not going to run up to us and they're also not going to come play with us and they can just ignore them.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, what other things? Because I think that when people think of socialization, they just think people and dogs. But there's also sounds and environments and textures and smells and settings. So let's talk about that.
Immersion into like exposure of different environments and things that are weird, things that are new, things that are different, things that are just different and objective in the dog's eyes. Like they don't understand why a trash truck is so loud or why it does what it does. And so exposure to those kinds of things, those aren't things that are comprehended in the dog world. So they have to be exposed to it or at least see it. Some dogs are just indifferent. They don't care from the get-go. But from a puppy, when you get them, loud sounds are oftentimes big scary triggers or big things moving, and they're small tiny puppies in a big whirl.
For example, when Grim was like 6 months old, all of a sudden orange traffic cones were terrifying. He would growl at them from the car. So it's funky things like that. And people and dogs make up a small portion of socialization to me. The bigger portion is everything else. I'll always look for what textures can I get under their feet, which sounds odd, but I'm looking to get puppies' feet on tarps and aluminum foil and sand and metal stairs and big rocks and tree stumps. Yeah. Playground equipment. Things like that. I'm looking to teach them how to use their body. So how to safely climb up on things, climb down from things, use just their front paws, get just their back paws on something. So we're trying to teach them how to use their body. Then there's, of course, like the sounds and the sights. I like going into big hardware stores like Lowe's or Home Depot. I love Whole Foods for this because you can't bring your dog in Whole Foods, but there's usually picnic tables outside. And then your dog gets to see all the carts and the assortment of people going by and the cars driving around. Skate parks are great because they can hear the skateboards and all the loud noises of the wheels on the pavement. I don't know the terms for that. Traffic. When I did live in Denver, I liked downtown Littleton because it was close to me. Foot traffic, the sound of the signal when it tells like pedestrian crossing, construction, things like that. And it can be kind of hard when you're not used to thinking that way to find things, but you're just trying to show your puppy as many pictures as possible, basically. I actually have a socialization scavenger hunt that I'll put the link for in the show notes that people can download and print. And it's just a bunch of check boxes that you can go and, the sound of a blender, an umbrella, a rain jacket. I had this one client dog once that was terrified of rain jackets. So now that's on there. But just funny things that you can show your puppy so that everything is normal.
Yeah. The more exposure that they get to weird things that aren't typically found in like their nature, behaviors or tendencies, the more you can create confidence or you can build their confidence and you can create indifference. That's how you can also help build neutrality for certain dogs who do lack confidence. Exposure to them early or older is the goal, is to build more confidence and indifference. Talking about climbing on things, I call it urban agility. I like to advise people, whether it's behaviorally addressed or not, but when you take dogs out to parks or like hiking trails, find things that are safe that the dogs can get four paws on, like rocks or tree stumps, park benches, things like that, that they can interact with. The big logs, maybe they can go over or under, through creeks if it's safe to jump like from one side to the other if it's close, things like that. Those are all really awesome ways that you can just utilize what's naturally around you, especially if you take the dog on hikes weekly on Sundays or something. Those are ways that you can still build confidence or you can still do things with your dog that way too.
There was a trainer up in Denver that did dog parkour group classes that I always meant to get around to, and I can never go.
I am about to start brainstorming a little bit of that. I love
Do that. Oh my God. Yeah, it would be so much fun. Okay. I have two more points because I know we're at our hour mark, but I have two more points, two more questions kind of that I want to ask you. And they're going to be a little bit of an it depends. But how would you sum up an answer if somebody were to call you and ask how to build confidence for nervous puppies? So let's say somebody's out in the world, their puppy is nervous of the traffic noises or nervous to climb the wooden stairs at the beach or something like that. What do we do? Obviously, we're not going to push the puppy into where they're scared and uncomfortable because it becomes a bad experience. But how do you build confidence for nervous puppies?
Everything's going to start in the home. If we can replicate certain scenarios or certain actions, sounds, or behaviors in the house, that things that we can control, we can get the puppy a lot more exposure to and a lot more like reinforcement behind, versus deeply immersing them. Jesus, instead of immersing them just straight into an environment that you would flood or overwhelm them. And oftentimes dogs, flooding is okay in certain scenarios, but oftentimes flooding just leads to just overwhelming and overstimulating puppy, and they're not really learning. But anyways, things in the house. So you can create like kiddie pools, and you can put like bottles and toys and like a little step stool or just like a small place board, or just tarps or just things that you can encourage the puppy to interact with and walk over and walk through and sniff through. You can throw treats in there and get them to use their nose to push around safely. Exposure to little things like that when they're younger are really great. Or learning how to overcome building the confidence and overcoming certain things if you can do it just in the front yard. I'll always start with trying to build a really solid house confidence before we go out into the world. But if we're at the point where we're out in the world where we just need to build confidence, say it's at like a Lowe's, I might park in the back of the parking lot and let the puppy observe from a distance and watch people pass by. The distractions are small enough visually that they aren't super overwhelming versus being, say, right front and center at the front of the parking lot where people are coming, going through the doors. But as the puppy's showing more confidence than that, then we would say close the gap or move closer to the door. But that's where I would at least start.
I think that people really thrive when you tell them what to do. What I've found works for a lot of my clients is I tell them I want you to teach the puppy something, not in the scary scenario, and I want them to know it really well. And I like it to be a game. It can be a toy game or a food game. I find food is easier for a lot of people to work with. Toys are my preference when we have enough toy drive, and there's ways to build it, but this is not the episode for that. But food just seems to be the easier one for more of my pet clients. So I'll teach them, I call it the yes, get it game. And it is literally, you say yes, you back up, the puppy comes and gets food from you, and then you say get it and you toss a treat. And it's just back and forth, back and forth. And I do that to teach the marker words and to build some muscle memory. But it becomes a game that the dogs know really well. So then let's say I'm out in the world, let's say I go to Lowe's and I'm in the middle of the parking lot where it's kind of busy and we're walking up to the store. If the puppy won't take food and they're nervous, you need to add more distance and we need to go farther back. I want to find the area where the puppy can take food from me and can play the game, whether it's tug or yes, get it, or some sort of food game. But I want to get the puppy doing something that they know. Because if you're asking them to do stuff they don't know. So now you're like heel and the puppy doesn't know heel. Now you're adding a bunch of social pressure and the puppy's like, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
But if you can capitalize on a fun game that the puppy knows and enjoys at a distance from the thing where they notice it, but they're not overwhelmed by it, that can help.
There's a difference between the tricks and obedience too. There's having a good foundation of reliable cues or reliable abilities to connect or engage with your dog is helpful. But sometimes when because we have higher expectations with obedience, sometimes dogs with lower confidence, obedience things aren't the right thing to start with. So doing fun tricks that have less expectations and all positive, like reinforcement attached to that behavior is a good way to bridge into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, my final question for you, and this is going to be a definite, it depends, and there's so many factors to it. But for the people that are listening that are just thinking this in their heads, how do we prevent a puppy from being aggressive or reactive? What steps can we take to help prevent that? To a degree, genetics play a role, and it's not always 100% avoidable. But what can we do to make sure we do right to help minimize the risk of a dog becoming aggressive or reactive?
Being very hands-on from the get-go and understanding what the puppy is showing from the beginning and when it is interacting with other dogs or people and setting it up for success that way. So what that would look like is like observing if the puppy is actually having fun in interacting with people or dogs, and then adjusting expectations if how big or how small the puppy's social circle needs to be as it grows or as it develops, and continually adding outings and exposure to those things that might create fallout. And fallout just means like regression in some ways, in some areas. It could be in a very specific category of the dog, or you could see fallout in other areas too, from lack of exposure to certain things when talking about regression. So that would be where I would start.
Okay, sounds good. Do you have anything else you want to add for socialization?
Exposure is a big word, and that should coincide with socialization, and kind of similar to children. If they're not exposed to a lot of things as a kid, they can maybe develop to be a little shy in their younger age or into their teenage years. So that's kind of a way that we might be able to equate it to dogs too, because we are social creatures. So exposure to things and letting them form their own opinions based on the things we expose them to, and understanding how the dog behaves and reacts based on each environment that it is exposed to or each thing it's exposed to. So I say the word exposure a lot, but it is really, really important. It's eyes on and body in those types of environments or those things.
Mhm. With that word exposure, it's not just showing them the things, it's teaching them how to navigate those things. And with young puppies, I'm going to be honest, my next puppy I get, I'm not even going to touch on obedience in any form until like 6 months old. That doesn't mean you have to teach your puppy how to heel through the pet store and sit at the park. It could just be you're teaching them what mindset to be in. You're teaching them how to pay attention to you, engagement with you, you're teaching them they can't jump on people. Like it doesn't have to be obedience, but it's your job to not just show them the things, but teach them how to interact with the things or how to navigate that part of the world.
We're kind of like our dog's emotional and behavioral GPS system for the first couple of years of their lives. And it's important to make sure that that's also known. It's a couple of years. It's not just the first 6 months. There's no real time frame on that. Like we talked about earlier, socialization, you continually, we continually work on it everywhere we take our dogs. But it's most important to do it in the beginning stages where that foundation can be laid.
All right. So that's all we have for socialization today. Sam, where can everybody find you?
Right now, just on Facebook and my website, Canine Insight LLC and canineinsighttraining.com.
Perfect. You can find the podcast itself at On Dog Terms on Instagram or TikTok. And you can find me at MJ_the Dog Trader, Instagram or TikTok, and CapeCanineAcademy.com. Sam, we'll talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.